Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Rockefeller Center's first public program of the winter term of 2019. We continue to celebrate our 35th anniversary this academic year. My name is Andrew Samwick, and I'm the director of the Rockefeller Center and a professor in the Department of Economics here at Dartmouth. For the past several years, I have been teaching and developing a course in social entrepreneurship, through which my students and I hope to devise bottom-up, human-centered solutions to causes or consequences of poverty that are themselves financially self-sustaining. The field began in various ways and various places decades ago, but it has emerged with a new visibility since 2006. That was the year that Muhammad Yunus and Grameen Bank jointly received the Nobel Peace Prize for, quote, their efforts to create economic and social development from below. Social entrepreneurship is essential in developing areas where traditional public sector institutions are absent, and the innovation of microfinance in Bangladesh, for which Yunus and Grameen Bank received the prize, has revolutionized access to credit across the globe. Sadly, perhaps, such solutions are now also more needed than ever in areas like the United States, where the ongoing decline in the quality of our public sector institutions will require decentralized, innovative approaches if we are to continue to make progress against social problems. Consider for a moment that almost every Dartmouth undergraduate has lived her whole life in the time since the now infamous shutdown of the federal government in 1995 and 1996. It's my own view that the federal government didn't fully reopen after that shutdown in the sense of being able to effectively implement known solutions to problems at scale. I developed my course because I think that a public policy curriculum is incomplete and more likely naive without a course in social entrepreneurship. And in that same spirit, I am pleased to welcome Chris Rudd to campus for today's lecture on youth design and juvenile justice reform. And even more pleased that we could do so as part of Dartmouth's celebration of Martin Luther King Jr. When I think of people today who carry the torch of Dr. King's movement for civil rights, I think of Chris Rudd, and after our lecture, you will too. Chris is a human-centered designer and community organizer with a passion for social justice. He has worked with youth on the south and west sides of Chicago, challenging them to engage with their communities through activism and technology. He recently completed a year-long fellowship at Stanford's Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design. As a civic innovation fellow at the D School, he spent a year immersed in graduate courses learning, applying, and honing his skills in the human-centered design methodology. Currently, he uses those skills through his work with the Institute of Design at Illinois Institute of Technology and as the founder and lead activator at ChiByDesign in Chicago. ChiByDesign is dedicated to empowering the people who are directly affected by issues with the tools and mindsets of design thinking to unlock creative and effective solutions. Chris will share his story with a focus on one such project, Expunged, through which youth from Chicago created a tech tool that opened up a needed path to a second chance for thousands of their peers. Through his work, Chris is marching with Dr. King 5 decades later. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your kind attention. Please join me in welcoming Chris Rudd.
That's the strongest welcome I've ever had. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I look forward to talking with more of you after I finish telling the story. I don't really do presentations. I like to tell stories to help you understand what happened. So these are actually some of the young people that I worked with. I look a lot cooler in that picture. I think I was younger and thinner, but we will continue. So I'm not sure how many people are familiar with like the design process, but this is what it typically looks like on paper. It is not linear, so you don't have to do one, then the other, then the other, then the other, then the other. You can go in and out of this process, but the piece that I like to emphasize the most is the empathy. A lot of times when we think about design thinking, it's the very sexy, put Post-it notes on walls and like we're jamming out and that feels fun. But if you haven't done the empathy work diligently and correctly, what you will design in that Post-it party phase, which is ideation, will be totally off the mark. And so this actual talk is iterated based on attending Professor Andrews' class this morning. So some of the graphics may look a little weird because I had to be quick about it. But I want to walk you through this story going from each piece of this process. So this is another, oh God, that's ugly. Yeah, I had to find that. This is also how that process looks. It's a lot of focusing and flaring. The empathy phase is really flaring. You know you have a problem, but you don't know quite what it is. And so in the human-centered process, you focus on talking to people who might be affected by that issue to then narrow down on the problem. And then you ideate, so you flare and you go big and you try to come up with as many ideas as you can. And then you say, okay, we think this is the one. You prototype it and you test it, so you focus again, and then you iterate. You do this process continually. It's not a one-stop shop. It's not a lightning bolt of creativity and solution. It is a process to generate more solutions. Luckily, we got it right the first time, though. So how did this start? This is actually a picture of a piece of the juvenile jail in Chicago. And so I was working for a nonprofit, and we had just started this council of young people called the Juvenile Justice Council. And this started because our county board president had decided that we had to make some changes, and that we should bring youth voice into this process to help. And so the story that I was told was she had a delegation from South Africa come to Chicago, and they toured the jail. And when they finished the tour, they said, okay, take us to the white jail. Where's the white jail? Because in Cook County, Chicago is in Cook County. It's a county that encompasses Chicago. I want to say 40% of the total population is black and brown. But if you go into the juvenile jail, it's 98% black and brown. 99, I'm sorry. 88% black, 11% Latino, and then speckles of everything else. And so that became the challenge. How do we reform the juvenile justice system? And so when you have a problem like that, it is too big to take on at one time. So we had to start to section out what does the system look like. And in my opinion, there's 4 pieces. There is the preconditions, what happens before you get arrested, the process between arrest and court, then from court through incarceration, and then finally post-incarceration. And so we decided to tackle the recidivism rates in Cook County. So recidivism being the process in which people exit detention, exit incarceration, and then go back. So how do we solve that problem? So now we have to get into this empathize portion. We don't know. A big part of design is taking a beginner's mindset. You know things, but you don't know everything that your user is going through, and so you need to engage with them to figure it out. So we had to do a lot of need finding, and we did this in multiple ways. So this is 2 of the students on the streets of downtown Chicago asking people, what do young people need when they come back? We also went and visited non-secure detention facilities, and these young people did interviews with currently detained young people to figure out what was happening. What are the challenges that you face? What are the barriers when you get home to make sure that you have a successful life? Which during that process, we found out that 25,000 young people were arrested every year in Chicago, and which meant they got these things called rap sheets. So if you had an interaction with the police, normally they would document it. That would then go onto your rap sheet, which would then prevent you from going to college, getting jobs. And for folks in public housing, you could lose your home. So if a child got arrested or got a rap sheet and the public housing provider found out about that infraction, they could then terminate the lease of the parent. So parents were then forced to choose whether or not to stay in public housing and keep a roof over your head or kick your child out. Parents chose both sides of that coin. And so understanding the scope of this problem in terms of rap sheets, we had to do a little bit more research. And so we found out that there's a process to get rid of these records, to give young people a second chance, which is called expungement. And so then it changed our definition of the problem. It wasn't just broadly, how do we reduce recidivism? We started to think about how do we increase access to this tool to give second chances, right? So we started to look at the websites where you could access expungement materials. We started looking at the documentation. We started looking at the language. All of this stuff was inaccessible to young people. And so they just said, this makes no sense. We can't use this thing that you have for us. At that time in 2013, of those 25,000 arrests, there were 70 petitions for expungement and 70 successful expungements granted. 100% success rate, but you're talking about 70 versus 25,000, not even a drop in the bucket. So now we're saying, okay, there's this process that allows you to achieve what you want, but you can't get to it, right? So now that's our challenge. And so now we get to go to this place of, what do we do? Let's ideate, let's think of a broad range of solutions to this, which included, we're not gonna go into all of them, but they talked about programs, they talked about flyers, they talked about advertising campaigns, like with movie stars and stuff, like Chicago stars, to try to get young people to do this. That summer, I really got interested in technology and how it could be used for social good versus just making a lot of money for Uber. And so they ended up landing on saying we can do better, and landing on creating an app. So how do you take all this information, make it accessible, and then provide the additional human tools necessary to navigate this process? So we had to develop prototypes, which came in the form of paper prototypes. They had to start sketching out what might this app look like. We had to start answering these questions. What do young people need help with? What are the barriers that currently exist? And then how do you make this experience enjoyable? People don't do things, for the most part, that they don't like. I'm sure everyone can reflect on a thing, probably testing, that you don't like, but you might be forced to do it, but if you had the choice, you would not, right? So how do we create things that people actually want to use? How do we create this tool that young people will engage with? And then we had to go test, right? We had to go into the field, put it in the hands of our users to see how they engage with it. And so this is a picture of the first version of Expungio. It's kind of wonky. We still use some of the language that the court system used. Like, we started saying like delinquent. And so then we had to figure out, okay, let's not use their terminology. We have to use terminology that people actually understand and would identify with. So if you say, how are you delinquent? Most people say, well, I'm not delinquent, so who are you talking about, right? And so we had to I think we did about 6 iterations, and it's continuing to evolve even to this day, based on the needs of young people, based on the desires of young people in Chicago. So they designed the app, they designed an ad campaign to put on public transportation, they did radio interviews, they did TV interviews to get the word out, because not only was the process inaccessible, most people didn't even know about the process. So how do you educate and inform people what to do, or that there's this possibility for correction? after we launched in January, I think we had about 8,000 hits to the site within the first month and a half. And you're talking about a site about expungement. This was adults. These were young people, people in Missouri. We were getting folks from all over desperate for help. This created such a buzz in the city that the mayor's office called, and this is our mayor. I don't know if Chicago's Rahm Emmanuel. It's pretty infamous now in our parts of the world. I don't know about New Hampshire, but he is not a guy who calls people for help. And so his ratings were pretty low, and he said, you know, I want to propose a bill for automatic expungement for young people. That was an assumption that a lot of people had, was that once you turn 18, you just had a fresh start, which is just not true. And so when he called us to see if our young people would go down to our state capitol to testify for this legislation, of course we said yes. And this is them testifying to the state legislature for this bill, because of the 25,000 who are arrested, 17,000 are for nonviolent offenses. You know, stealing candy, you know, who knows, loitering. I don't know. They give these young people tons of criminal charges for very petty things. And so with this bill, it would automatically expunge those nonviolent offenses once they hit 18. So they went down to Springfield, they testified, the bill passed in January 1st of 2015, the automatic expungement bill became law. So now we're basically trying to put ourselves out of business. But there's still 8,000 young people annually that need this service. The app connects, so once you identify that you have a record and you need some support, I love young people, but I also know that if you put a pebble in the way, they will stop. And so we were trying to eliminate every barrier possible. And so it connected you to a pro bono attorney, to then take your case. That attorney would fill out the paperwork, go in front of the judge for you. This was all free. So we were really trying to target low-income urban teens, but it was applicable across the state, right? And then once we had the policy change, you know, I'm saying 17,000 in Chicago. I have no idea what the ramifications are across the state of Illinois. I'm sure it's much higher. So some of the victories were the automatic expungement. We actually modified the process for expungement. So before we started doing this, if you wanted to get your record expunged, you used to have to go to police headquarters to get a copy of your rap sheet to then go petition a judge. When we launched the app, I think within the first week or so, we had close to 150 people say, like, I'm ready to go. They had been contacted by the lawyer. The lawyer said, okay, go get your rap sheet, and then we can handle this case for you. 0 people came back. And so we were able to provide data to say, this is a big part of the barrier for people to use your services. Their reasoning was that you had to go to police headquarters because that's the only place in the city that has a fingerprint terminal to verify your identification to then give you this rap sheet. That's ridiculous, right? So one of our partners was able to secure funding to buy another fingerprint terminal that we then put in the juvenile court building. So as these young people were going to take care of their cases, we could say, hey, come upstairs, do your fingerprints. We'll get this process going for you. That led to some more modifications, but we were basically able to eliminate physical barriers for people to access this tool. The app has been replicated in 4 states, and a bunch of the young people that I worked with on this project we did this for about 2-3 years. The vast majority are now dedicated to doing a lot of juvenile justice work. So I have students who were going to go into psychology, but now they want to do juvenile psychology, just start working in the jails. One of the students got into technology, so now he does app development for social good agencies. So it was a great way to amplify their desire to serve their communities, their schools, their peers, and hopefully that will continue with them throughout their time so that we can start making this world a lot better place that's more human-centered is my goal. Okay, I'm done talking. Questions? You can see them again. Or comments. You can say whatever you want.
So I saw that part of the advertisement for the app, there's a free lawyer section, and I was wondering how you're able to work that into this program. Was it like pro bono lawyers who just wanted to get involved, or was there a lot of work that students had to do to make that happen?
So there's an organization in Chicago called the Legal Assistance Foundation. So part of my job as the director of the council was to now bring all these adults together. And so they had already developed a juvenile expungement help desk in the court, but they weren't getting traffic because young people didn't know, A, that they existed, B, that, what to do with this process. So once we partnered with them, they already had lawyers on staff dedicated to this piece of law, who then, once the forms came in, they went directly to their email, and the lawyer took it from there. We were kind of a facilitator, but we didn't have legal expertise to do that. So yeah, we had to create partnerships. There was no way we were going to be able to handle this by ourselves.
How did Expungio kind of evolve through your iterations, and how did user testing work? What kind of feedback did you get, and how did it evolve, basically?
Sure.
Hi.
Hi.
So, I was asking how the. That's not working. Oh, let's try the other one. Sorry.
Yeah. Do you need the mic for recording? Got you. Okay.
Hello. Does this work? Nope. Okay. I can project. So, I was asking how Expungio evolved throughout the course of your iterations, because you said that you had like 6 different prototypes that you worked through, and how your user feedback informed your further prototypes, and how you think how it changed the most over the course.
Sure. So I believe the first iteration we had, I think there were 7 different pages that you had to go through to get to the final section that said, give us your name, your number, for us to contact you. We realized that a lot of those questions were unnecessary. It was also information that people couldn't remember. So that's one way. We finally got down to the point where it's like, how have you ever had like contact with the police? You say yes. How old are you when that happened? We're like, all right, you have a juvenile record. Even if we don't know that for sure, like we can't access your juvenile record, but you should be now connected with someone who can, and then put you on that process. Language iterations were crucial. There's definitely some technical appy stuff that I don't know how to describe it, but like there's stuff around like, don't let people leave the page because it keeps them engaged more. So we started to develop that stuff. And then, like I said, one of the students who was a part of the concept is now, he's actually the developer for it. So he's doing all type of like crazy stuff now. So if you have your phone, you can definitely go on it and see some of that. And I guarantee you it'll change even more as it goes. But yeah, those are a couple that stand out for me. Oh, okay. So I saw you first, and then we'll go.
So just bouncing off of that question, there was a part in the prototype section where we asked how you guys can make the experience more enjoyable. So I was wondering, like, where in the final prototype would you say are like the most enjoyable elements for users?
I don't know if we quite achieved enjoyment.
Could you please repeat the question?
Okay. Where did we create points of enjoyment on the app? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if we quite achieved enjoyment. It's not an enjoyable process, so I don't know if we've done that. Our goal was to do that. One of the things that came up, though, from asking that question was, what happens if you're not eligible for expungement? Like, we've almost promised you that we can do this thing for you, but then you get on the app and, you know, there's certain charges that are extremely hard to expunge for young people. And if you have that, now it's like, womp womp, life sucks again, right? And so thinking about this point of enjoyment, they had to now answer this question, what do we do for those who aren't eligible? So they created a whole list of resources that says, like, your life is not over. You can still continue. Here are ways to do it. So they provided resources on, like, how to interview if you have a record. Where are places that you can get access to employment for people with records, right? So again, I don't know if they were, like, smiling after they used the app, but hopefully they had a bit more hope once they were done.
Who are the students? You keep saying your students. Who participated in your project to help you go out on the street and test the app and build it?
Sure. So the question was, who participated in the project? Who are these young people? They are high school and very few college students. Some formerly incarcerated, some not. Who led this thing? So my job as the director was to create the frameworks and then allow them to explore, and then support their exploration. So when they came with this idea, I thought it was brilliant. It was not supported organizationally, so then we had to go around the back to make it happen. But yeah, does that answer? Yeah. So yeah, traditional high school students, some who are like at some of the top schools in Chicago, some who are at the worst, and some who have a very intimate relationship with the juvenile justice system.
How did you advertise this app and its resources to your target audience, like the juveniles that would be using it?
Yep, so we did targeted public transportation ads. We were trying to do stuff with, like, Pandora. They have crazy analytics of, like, but that was actually not, when we were thinking about Pandora, at first we were thinking about the user, but then one thing we realized was that the people who were really encouraging these young folks to use the apps were their parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents. And so we started to do targeted ads at that population, because they know when their younger loved one had that interaction, they could remember all this stuff, and they could push. So yeah, two-prong approach. So we did, like, really direct outreach with young people. The beauty of having a team of young people is that they know young people. And so they would go back to their schools, they would do forums, they would do targeted outreach in the school, in their communities. Like, it's just like an army of really talented young people. And then, once we got media attention, that really, skyrocketed the level of interaction with the app.
Chris, could you get people in the judicial system to help you out? A sympathetic judge who, when the gavel went down, said, "Oh, but this is a next step that you can take."
So the question was, could we get people in the judicial system to be support networks for this? I don't know if we actually got a judge to say that. We definitely worked with a lot of legal professionals. So the public defender's office would keep, we started making these stickers. So they would keep stickers in their office. We partnered with a lot of nonprofit organizations to get the word out. We had a relationship with the state's attorney's office as well, but I don't believe they were advertising for us. But we worked with each of those offices on different projects. So the fall in which I left, we had just done a whole redesign of a juvenile courtroom and a juvenile waiting room, which we partnered with that criminal building that I showed you in the first slide. We partnered with them, and they've actually allowed young people to redesign the chapel services and I think one of the waiting rooms to be more youth and family friendly.
Forgive me if you already asked this question, but how long is the process? I would imagine from start to end, because I can imagine some folks might get disillusioned and drop out, even though this could be a resource for them.
Sure. How long is the expungement process? It used to be real long. So you would, once you knew you had to go to get your rap sheet, you could go on certain days, certain hours, and there was like one officer there to man the station. So like obscene wait times. Then you had to come back in 2 weeks to actually pick up the rap sheet. Then you had to go to the court to file the petition. And then who knows how long, your case would be called. So we didn't have like an accurate timeline. We actually sent one of the students through and like public radio followed her and they had given her the wrong rap sheet. They said they gave her an adult. It was like all type of craziness. So the ways we reduced the time was one, taking the fingerprint terminal out of police headquarters. So as you were coming to your trip for court, you could then go upstairs and get that done. We couldn't change the wait time on the receiving the rap sheet because that has to go through the state database. But we actually made a change where you no longer had to be present to file the petition. You could sign a waiver to the lawyer. So once the lawyer who was already situated at the courthouse got your rap sheet, they could do all the paperwork for you. You didn't even have to go to court. So you would just get a letter saying, congratulations, or, we need to try again. So reducing the wait or that process for the individual by at least a month. Well, that was a lot of hands.
Did the app prove to have a positive impact of reducing recidivism?
Did the app have
Did it reduce recidivism?
did it reduce recidivism? Actually, I don't know. We haven't done that type of study. That's like not what we were situated to do. Researchers, feel free. But yeah, I can't answer that honestly.
So before you created the app, all 70 people who applied for expungement were granted it. But once you open up the pool of applicants by making it like a more accessible process, what was the percentage of people who successfully were expunged?
I haven't tracked the success rates, but I know the applications went up. I think in 2014 it was like 125, and it's trickled up more since then. I haven't checked. I've been kind of away from this project for a while and haven't kept up with the data, but good question. Yes.
So the app sits atop an important public policy question, which is what ought society forgive and what's not forgivable. So I was wondering what your views on expungement, how they've evolved over time, and if you have any thoughts about the underlying legislation about what it can be expunged and what you can't.
How have my views on expungement and I guess overarching juvenile justice evolved? Quite a bit. I think I've always been against this concept of the criminal justice system in this country in particular for a long time. I didn't realize how messed up it was. Illinois used to have juvenile life without parole. So you could get arrested at 13 and that was it for you. That's just an unconscionable thing to have. And there were 6 states that had that policy. So it opened my eyes to the gross injustices that occur within the system. And in the juvenile system, focused at young people, which to me is like, if we can't have faith that they will change, then just throw it out. We're done. So with that, expungement in particular, I don't believe in this idea of punishment. Not across the board, but to think that someone does something and the way that we fix other people from doing it is punishing people, that's not working. We're not stopping murders by locking up murderers, right? We're not doing that. We're not stopping rape by locking up rapists, all right? Like, we can see this in Hollywood. We can see this in the music industry, right? We can see it in college campuses. So the goal that we're trying to achieve, the criminal justice system is not helping us do it. So do I think there has to be measures of accountability and reformation for people? Absolutely. I know that those are not happening within those walls. Now, I'm sure everyone can say, like, I know somebody that, like, went to jail and now they, like, got their life together. Cool. I'm sure that's happened. I know it's happened. But for the vast majority of people, we are destroying lives in those walls and outside. So I guess my level of exposure to this system grew, which increased my disdain for that system.
So I guess if you really felt like you were a lot more exposed to the system and also just to the sort of intricacies of working and success of working with young people to this magnitude, it seems like a very successful project. And you mentioned that you've been away for a while doing other things. I'm curious how your time working on this and the experiences that you had and success especially, but just in general, the experiences has really sort of what that's caused you to do and why and how since then.
Sure. So what have I done essentially since then? No. I know it's a more articulate question. I'm just trying to get it.
Yeah, how has it changed?
Sure. So one of the lessons that I learned from this project was the way that we approach youth civic engagement was to beg adults to listen to young people. Take their ideas, listen to their ideas, and like do something with it. And we probably had a 5% success rate with that. This showed me that young people could create the solution and then force the adults to their table, right? This idea of the decision-making table always sat in a back office in a government building. And so with the internet, they have the table, right? And adults now have to figure out, or older folks, I guess I'm an adult now, right? Have had to figure out how to get permission to go to that table. So when I left the organization and the program, I went to Stanford to develop a youth program focused on empowering young people to identify issues and create civic technology to solve that issue. So how do we replicate this in other sectors, education, healthcare, street harassment, whatever the case may be, whatever it is that they care about, how do you empower them to create the solutions without having to wait on someone who is actually not listening to them because they have no voting power, right? And so that changed me a lot. And the work that I'm doing now is all social sector based. So ChiByDesign, the idea behind the name is that Chicago has made us, and then we have to design the Chicago that we want. So how do we empower people who live there, from there, to create the city that we want? And I say Chicago because that's where I'm at, but I believe that generally. So I hope that answers.
Are you looking to?
Oh, no,
hold
we
on.
might have the mic working.
Are you looking to offer this service to other states? And also, what are some of the challenges of scaling it up?
Okay. Yeah, so it was replicated in 4 states. All the code is open source, so we figured we did the heavy lifting, take it, do something with it. However it fits your state, however it fits the young people in your state, do it. We don't care about ownership and any of that. Second part of your question was like, what was holding it back? Or what's stopping it from scaling? I say that it was me. So I had a full-time job leading this council, which was like day in, day out, youth development, leadership development, and then holding on to this, like also directing this huge entity, which became the app. and I couldn't do both well. So my main focus was the day-to-day with them, which meant I couldn't focus on the app. And so what I've learned now is that young people, or what I believe is that young people should create these technologies, and then we have to empower them to create the containers in which to take it. So these young people should have had an organization called Expungio. They should have had a nonprofit. They should have had a social entrepreneurship, something to take this to the next level. So I think that's I think adults are holding it back, and I was a part of that, not knowing at the time, but yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Bad.
Oh, was it someone else?
You had your hand up, no?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Sorry.
I was going to ask, oh, that's loud. I was going to ask, what role does the education system play in keeping people, or keeping kids in particular, out of the criminal justice system in the first place?
Role is to keep police out of schools. The vast majority of arrests were happening in schools. And so issues that normally were addressed by school administrators, fights, whatever the case may be, in certain schools, there's a police officer that now takes that, schoolyard fight, and now it's a battery. Now you're going to jail, right? Now there's a record. And so we haven't seen the data to say why police should be in schools, right? Was it in Florida, the police officer was hiding around the school while this other student was shooting, right? Like we're not seeing the proof to say why they should be there, but we are seeing the destructive outcomes of police in schools. So that would be my main thing.
Hi. Why do you think these kind of crappy systems exist? For example, the thing that you described that was so hard for people to and students to understand who are in juvenile justice, that these are fairly advanced people developing those, but why do you think they don't understand this very fundamental problem that what they try to make will not at the first place be very useful? And why do you think this exists in so many facets of our society, especially government?
I think there's many reasons. I think one is racism, and two is money. So, this idea of the criminal justice system that we currently have has really been predicated on locking up people of color, which is the racism part. And then they figured out that we can make a lot of money off of this. So there's a lot of forced labor. I mean, this dates back to late 1800s, early 1900s, right? And so I don't think I'm presenting anything that thousands of people, probably millions of people don't know. But I think, there was a shareholder memo that came out from CCA, the Corrections Corporation of America, that said get ready for the boom, because they were planning on locking up a lot of people. So now there's a switch into immigration detention. So there's a lot of money being made, not only housing people or incarcerating people, the transportation, right? Each level makes people a lot of money. The phone calls, right? There's so many different levels of economic sustainability for certain folks, that I think these conditions continue.
So sort of sparked by what I heard from the beginning of a different question about education and what role does that play. I was wondering, so we were sort of introduced to your whole talk within the idea of social entrepreneurship, and I was wondering if obviously public systems are failing a lot of youth, specifically these marginalized youth, somewhat, some would argue, purposefully, and some would argue unpurposefully. That's sort of aside from my question, but would you argue that, or do you think that public institutions do have the ability to provide similar or the same kind of empowerment to marginalized youth that your specific social entrepreneurship has tried to tackle?
I think they have more ability, right? They get our tax dollars. They have lots of access to funds. They have access to state universities, right? There's brain power, there's capital, there's all the tools necessary to create social programs. Like the professor said, the federal government never quite reopened. Like, why? Like, that, to me, that's the question. Why are they not utilizing their resources to do things like this?
Do you have any, okay, it's back. Do you have any advice in terms of, I mean, of course, advocacy and direct action, but do you have any sort of ideas for how we can actually force public action in terms of this?
I think, to me, the lesson in this is creating solutions, right? So, putting this in the frame of the design process, identifying a real need that people have, create the solution for it. We don't always have to wait on legislation. Like, there's things people can do. I was just talking to a professor earlier about, like, there's a lot of movement around, like, bail reform. So there's organizations that are literally raising money and just bailing people out. So before bail reform, policy takes place, they're doing it, right? So there's tons of things. Like I said, identifying the actual need, create the solution, and implement, right? But for me, using that process, like, talk to the people who are facing the challenge so you can create the right solution, right? Or co-create, however you want to, whatever process you want to take. Mm-hmm.
I have a question. So does Illinois have a teen court system? I mean, and so I'm from Florida, and I've worked in the teen court system in Clay County and Duval County, where first-time offenders go into the teen court system instead of the juvenile system, and their records are closed when they turned 18. Is there a similar establishment in Illinois? How does that interact with this? Or
Anything under, not even under, age is not the definition anymore. Depending on the offense, you can be 16 charged in adult court, but you can't be 21 charged. So juvenile court is up to 18 or 17. So theoretically, anything you do under that age is juvenile court. So there's not a children's court and then a teen. It's just all considered juvenile. But yeah, no, they didn't erase your record at 18, and they still don't for some offenses.
so I guess in Florida, there's a specific diversion track. So if you are between the ages of 13 and 18, it's a way of trying to reduce juvenile offenses and putting you into the actual juvenile system it's called teen court, but where everyone except for the judge is a teen, so your lawyers are teenagers, the jury are teenagers, and if it's a nonviolent first-time offense, you go into that system, and then your records are sealed right after that.
I don't think we have it in Cook County, but I've seen those programs. Yeah, I don't think so. We have diversion programs that have been quite successful. They've reduced the juvenile population in the jail and the prisons drastically over the past 4 years in Illinois and in Cook County. There's a great set of folks who are leading the juvenile justice department within the state and within the city. So we're seeing progress, but we're not at zero. So more work to do.
Yeah, so I'm curious about, you mentioned there were 4 stages of this process, and you were sort of looking at the recidivism stage. Have you noticed any upstream effects on, say, the way police do their job, now knowing that the likelihood of expungement is much greater?
That we have not seen. I think Chicago just got exposed a year or two ago as utilizing stop and frisk at a larger rate than New York. So no, not yet. We're supposed to be under consent decree, but then Sessions said you no longer have to do that in Chicago. So the hopes for police reform are kind of dissipating. the 3 cops who were indicted for the cover-up of the Laquan McDonald murder were just set free, or not found guilty, which was a big blow to people's hope for a crack in the wall of silence, or changing police practices. But so now the hope is fading, or optimism, as we talked about. Optimism is low. People are still very hopeful and still fighting, but yeah, it's a hard institution to crack.
So I think in recent years there's been some sort of a trend in devaluing the work done by youth, especially like the prime example for me is with March for Our Lives. Some politicians or people like political commentators saying that because like we are youth, we can't necessarily make like valuable change or offer valuable change. And I was wondering if that's more of a recent trend, or if you also faced this sort of like bias against your group of young people because of their age, and like maybe some people didn't value the work they were doing as much as they should have.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that's a trend of society. I think about like when you talk about like the rock and roll generation, how their parents were like, this is craziness. What are you doing? Like, I think it's scary how time changes and you see what young people can do or what they are doing. I think the beauty in young people is not asking permission for most of the things, right? Just do it. So I definitely see the devaluing. It happened then, and I see it to continue to happen, but I'm very hopeful seeing young people disregard the haters, right? Like, do it. If you see a problem, solve it. If we haven't done it, you can't wait on us anymore, right? It's your world. You have to take it up. If people are telling you no, keep going, right? I hope that answers. But yeah, like to all older folks, I don't think the folks in this room are of that. But yeah, we have to listen. Like, I'm 35 and I'm like, my time is over, right? Like, I gotta step aside. Seriously, like I look at my role now as like to help, like give experiences that I've had, but I'm not gonna be, this is your world now. And then you'll have to move aside. So that's the trend. Oh, cool. Thank you all. And I just put this up because like if you're working on projects that you're trying to like do good stuff, I'm happy to lend a hand and help in whatever way. So like I don't put this up like, hit me up because I need promotion, but like we have to collectively do this work. And so however I can be helpful, let me know. Cool, thanks.